Earlier this week, actually on Tuesday, more than 20 Republican state attorneys general filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration for threatening to withhold federal nutritional assistance from schools and programs that do not embrace the left's radical gender ideology. Yes, I know it's hard to believe, but the Biden administration is literally threatening to take away lunch money from the neediest school children if schools do not get in line with their demand that boys be able to go into girls' locker rooms and showers, among other things. Here to talk with me about this is one of the state attorneys generals who is challenging the Biden administration on this, the Attorney General of Alabama, Steve Marshall. Steve, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony. By the way, I loved your analogy of the Biden administration as a schoolyard bully, because that's exactly what's going on here. They are holding children hostage in an effort to be able to enforce this radical agenda, and we're going to push back and make sure that doesn't happen.
What does this tell you about their priorities?
Well, it's clearly misplaced. I mean, we want to be able to withhold valid and appropriate nutrition from the children of hardworking, low-income families. Also, they can, for example, in Alabama, cause us to set aside a law that was appropriately adopted to make sure that boys participate in boys' sports and girls participate in girls' sports. And yet we continue to see multiple efforts at the federal level to impose, through improper rulemaking when Congress clearly won't do it, an effort to enforce this radical gender ideology that clearly is not embraced by a majority of Americans.
So General, there's two issues here. One is the substance of what they're trying to do, but the second is what you just pointed out, and I want to make sure people understand this. There is a way that you go about this. There is a rule-making procedure that allows states to have input and other affected parties to have input. They're circumventing the process, are they not?
Absolutely, they're circumventing the process. I mean, there's the appropriate purpose when an agency wants to act to be able to publish those rules for public consideration as well as comment before anything is officially adopted. But what we see here is just a continuation of what we saw occur during the Obama administration, is that when the executive branch of leftist ideology can't accomplish what they want to through the appropriate processes, they intend to circumvent that to be able to push forward using federal dollars as the mechanism to try to enforce their beliefs and their policies on states that otherwise would reject it.
So, General Marshall, isn't this kind of lawlessness? I mean, isn't that what this is? Doing what you want to do, regardless of what the procedures and law requires?
Oh, it isn't just kind of lawlessness. It is absolutely lawlessness, and a failure to abide by the structure that we've established both through our laws as well as through our Constitution. You know, the wonderful thing about sitting in the role of Attorney General is that you have the opportunity to be the watchdog of the federal government, to be able to ensure that they comply with not only the statutory obligations that are applicable to the executive branch, but also that they are consistent with the parameters of the Constitution. On multiple fronts during this administration, we've seen opportunities for us to be able to weigh in and to be able to push back, and have been successful. And we will be in this case, as we have been in many others thus far.
Yeah, I just want to echo that fact, because from my vantage point, I've watched that, especially in the Biden administration, just in the, almost 2 years that they've been here, how if it were not for the attorneys generals at the state holding this administration accountable, there would be no accountability. I mean, you guys have done a tremendous job. And as you pointed out, in almost every case, you've been successful because you're standing on the side of the law.
We absolutely are. And Tony, we not only see it as it relates to this administration, but also the efforts of those to coerce woke corporations in fostering this agenda. You may have seen this week that we made a very clear statement against Google when we see our colleagues on the left that are attempting to intimidate Google as it relates to the ability to search and find valid information involving our pregnancy centers that are doing remarkable work around the country. You know, this is a multi-pronged front, and it's one that I'm proud to be able to stand with my Republican colleagues across the country and being able to fight back.
Yeah, explain that for just a moment to our viewers and listeners, what Google was doing and what the attorneys generals are doing.
Well, we hope that Google isn't doing it, but what we did see, for example, the Attorney General from New York calling upon Google to limit or censor the searches that individuals would have looking for pregnancy centers and information available to pregnancy centers. I mean, these are groups across the country that are serving almost 2 million women, that have provided over $250 million in services, both medical and counseling and in product to individuals. And yet those on the left who are not happy about the Dobbs decision, what we've talked about before, are trying to limit the ability of these nonprofits who are working in a remarkable way to be able to impact lives and families. They want Google and others to be able to limit the ability of individuals to obtain information about those needed services. And so we made it very clear this week that to the extent that Google adopts that philosophy, we will use every mechanism available to us to be able to push back against it.
I mean, that is certainly not a stretch when you look at what social media has done in silencing the viewpoints that they disagree with. And so it would only follow that, you know, the pro-abortion crowd, not wanting any competition from these charitable organizations that are truly doing ministry and not using government money or taking government money, they want them out of the way. And so it certainly would not be beyond the reach, I think, of Google and other social media giants to do just that.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to be vigilant in that. And all they're doing is hurting, again, almost 2 million people that last year alone received needed services from these wonderful organizations. And again, organizations, many of which are faith-based, that are stepping up to provide a void that exists in communities across our country. You know, they are doing remarkable work, and clearly we've seen some of the lashing out of the left against these organizations post-Dobbs, but I'm proud of the strength of these organizations and what they do for women across our country.
And again, General Marshall, just grateful for the fact that we have these AGs at the state level that are doing this work to really protect those that are wanting to do the ministry, but also to uphold the law. Now, I want to go back. We just got a minute or so left. I want to go back to the top story we were talking about. How does the Biden administration propose to take this lunch funding? What's the vehicle they're using to take this away from schools?
Is that vehicle we talked about before, which is the power of the purse. You know, to some extent, I think it's a broader issue to discuss one day, is the use of federal dollars to remove and limit state sovereignty. Here, the federal government, acting as that bully on the schoolyard, is saying, if you don't do what we're saying, we're going to remove these needed funds that will impact children in an adverse way. And so, again, we think they've gone through an absolutely improper process and unlawful process in trying to eventually adopt this rule. And I have every confidence that, just like we were recently with the lead of the state of Tennessee, that we'll be successful here again in pushing back against a rule that would impact what's going on in our schools.
All right. Well, again, General Marshall, grateful for you and your Republican colleagues that are out there fighting to uphold the law and make sure that the federal government stays within its proper boundaries. Good to see you again.
You too. Thank you, Tony.